Hello, everybody. I'm Eliza Sherman. I'm the CEO of Ellementa. I love doing these webinars. We always have amazing guest experts like tonight, and we do record this. All of you who have registered and all of you here today are going to receive a recording afterward. And I love just doing this first with video so you can see us, but we also have slides that we're going to be using just to go through all the facts and figures. When you get the video afterwards, you'll see all the slides again so you can watch it over and over again. So we're going to turn off our video right now for the slides. Erica, did I forget anything? I feel like I forgot something.
Maybe to tell them to stick around. Well,
that's
that's
in the slides. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. It's been a month since we did last time.
It has been. Okay,
how about
we'll
disclaimer? Let me do a disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
Okay.
There you
All right, and then we'll turn off our video. Then we'll go to the slides. So I do like to make this disclaimer to make sure all of you know. Normally I say we're not medical professionals, but we have one here today. So what we do not do is diagnose, and what we do not do is make an individual recommendation to any of you. So just making sure you know that we're here to give you some facts and some figures, give you some things to think about, and to answer some questions. But disclaimer, it's not for you personally. You still need to see your own health provider. All right, that said, we are going to turn off our video. And then I just have to click a couple of different things to get us over to the presentation. Sharing the screen now. And let's begin. First, I want to thank some of the companies that are supporting this webinar in particular. Clean Coconut is created by a registered nurse. It's a line of skincare products with CBD. And as you can see from the slide on your screen, no fillers, no parabens, no nanoparticles, none of the bad stuff, all of the good stuff, and incredible scents. Pictured there, you can see Deep Relief. It's lavender. She's got orange, I believe lime as well. Just really beautiful products, skincare products. I want to also point out GEOVANA and thank them for their support. They create CBD products for women. They have a women's formula tea, as well as some other teas that are coming out. They also have tinctures, they have, which are the oils, and capsules. Very much geared toward women's health, and specifically PMS, menopause, and general women's health. Now today, and with all of our webinars, we want to empower you with better information about cannabis and CBD for health and wellness. And we want to introduce you to Ellementa, our women's wellness community. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to be talking to you about Ellementa, just to give you a sense of what we do. But first, stay tuned and stick around, because one lucky winner is going to get all of these products. They will get the women's formula tea, the Deep Relief from Clean Coconut, and also a copy of my latest book that I co-wrote with Dr. Junal Chen. That's an amazing bundle of gifts. But just so you know, if you are in Canada and if you win, we will have to give you alternate gifts which do not have CBD, since we cannot ship CBD to Canada. Okay. We want you to be with us through your wellness journey. Our goal is to help you connect to the good information, the information that's based on science and research, the anecdotes, the stories from women like you who are going through similar things. I think that's one of the most important things about what we do here at Ellementa. We want to educate and empower you. We truly believe that you tell one woman the right information and recommend some good products to her, and she affects the lives instantly of 3, 4, 5, half a dozen or a dozen other people, her immediate family, her extended family, her friends and colleagues. They all benefit when you empower a woman with knowledge. And so that's why we do what we do. And we do that both online and offline. So here's one of our online events that you're here for, but we also have in-person local gatherings of women coming together, talking about health and wellness, talking about cannabis and CBD, and connecting with experts and really great products. So products is a very important piece because there's so many products out on the shelf. And do we know if they're good? How do we know? Are they safe? There's a lot of things happening in the news today of products that are not safe. How do you find the good ones, the right ones, to do what they say they're going to do and to not contain anything that's harmful? So this is something that we work very hard to vet and to bring that information to you. Then content, articles. We love producing content. We're coming out with a podcast. These webinars, again, are content. It's a way of getting that information out to more people. So this is something that we put up on our website. We also have a website called Her Canna Life at hercannalife.com. There's a brand new profile of Dr. Jessica Knox, who is our guest today. But before we go into meeting her, I want to know a little bit more about you. So through the magic of Erica in the background, she's going to throw up a poll here for you. So what condition, your main condition that you want to address with cannabis or CBD? Clearly, there are many conditions that we are looking to address, but pick one from this list. And if it's not on the list, just click other. But what is the main thing that has drawn you to cannabis or that has drawn you to CBD? Also, we do know that cannabis and CBD can address some different things or affect you in different ways. So just pick the one that jumps right at you, that speaks to you, that you're experiencing. Very curious to see where everybody is, what everybody's experiencing. I could give it a couple of more minutes, but yes, you can click it yourself and let us know. And I'm also curious to see if what rises to the top is the one that always does. I mean, there's really two things that people say, that women in particular say, that they're trying to address. So let's see if those come up for us. And here we go. There's the magic. There it is. Wow. Pain. Yeah. Pain. And that's interesting. Sleep and anxiety / panic are tied. But those are always the three top ones.
Yeah. I was expecting pain and anxiety.
Yeah. So then it's a little bit hard to see which one. Sleep or anxiety. But you know, when you think about it, they're all sort of intertwined.
Exactly.
And that's something that I had discovered is how my chronic pain worsened when I was not getting enough sleep, and you can't get good sleep because of your pain. Right. So it was like a vicious cycle and spiral. So I know a lot of people experience that. Okay, let's go to our next slide because now we get to introduce Dr. Jessica Knox. Jessica, obviously we have a couple of bullet points here about you, but if you could just say a few words about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, happily. So hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Jessica Knox. Very pleased to be back with Ellementa this afternoon to chat about dosing and answer questions. So I am a physician trained in the Western conventional medical model. My residency was in preventive medicine, which is a primary care and public health specialty. But for me, even preventive medicine was not quite preventive or lifestyle enough. I'm really passionate about using lifestyle. When I say lifestyle, I mean nutrition, botanicals, including cannabis, but other herbs as well, activity, mind-body therapies, all of these things to help promote and restore health and wellness. So after I finished my residency, I joined my family in working in the cannabinoid medicine space. So I actually followed my mom and dad, who respectively had retired from anesthesia and emergency medicine and picked up cannabinoid medicine. And my sister, who is a family and integrative medicine doctor, also finished her residency and went into the practice of cannabinoid medicine with the family. We were all just, I think, really excited about the opportunity to practice medicine in a different way, in a way that made more sense for patients, in a way that was less dependent on pharmaceutical drugs that, in my experience in my primary care clinic, did not help any of my patients feel better. But you know, through cannabis, we were seeing patients feel better. Their conditions were getting better, or at worst, quote unquote, their quality of life was improving. Which, you know, at the end of the day, if you're not enjoying the life you're living, then what are you doing? So we were seeing, you know, again, at worst, patients just having improved quality of life. So it was a really wonderful sort of transition away from conventional medicine, where I really felt like I was sort of banging my head against a wall, prescribing pharmaceutical drugs, to move into cannabis medicine, where really what we're focusing on is the endocannabinoid system, which we'll talk a little bit about. But the endocannabinoid system that cannabis works on, but so do all those other lifestyle therapies that I talked about. And so along with my family, I co-founded the American Cannabinoid Clinics. The clinics are based out of Portland, Oregon, which is our hometown. We also do telemedicine clinics, so we can see patients from all over to really counsel on endocannabinoid health and using CBD or cannabis as part of a health and healing regimen. We've also founded Advent Academy, which is a training program with the first training modules dedicated to healthcare professionals to train more clinicians in endocannabinology, which is the study of the function, dysfunction, and modulation of the endocannabinoid system. And we also have our Doctor's Knox brand, which was built to really educate all consumers and all stakeholders of the cannabis industry, because while we recognize the importance of clinicians knowing the endocannabinoid system and knowing how to modulate it, we recognize it's just as important for the people making cannabis products or CBD products or services, and the lawmakers making rules around these things, and lawyers who are making business deals. Everybody needs to understand that there's an endocannabinoid system in which the science of cannabis is really based. And so Doctor's Knox is our effort through events and seminars, our effort to educate the general public about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system, so that individuals can feel enabled and empowered to you know, go find the products that work well for them, to become their own healers. I'm a strong believer that we are actually all capable of being our own healers, and our bodies are innately programmed to heal themselves if only we know how to get out of our own way. So we do a lot of educating to help people get out of their own way or learn how to support their endocannabinoid system for health.
Fantastic. Well, I learn more about you every time we do this. This is really great. I can't wait to read the profile either. It just got published today. So thank you for that. Definitely a lot of knowledge to share tonight. So let's get into this now. I want to just lay the groundwork for what we're going to talk about today. It's plant medicine, so there are some variabilities. This is talking about a plant, not talking about necessarily manufactured pharmaceutical products, although as this industry matures, there are more and more products out there that are being manufactured, and a lot along the lines of pharmaceuticals, pills, tablets, capsules, sublinguals, etc. So still it is dealing with this endocannabinoid system, which still we need to do a lot more research on, and different chemical compounds within cannabis that we also need to do a lot more research on. But a lot of research does exist. Knowing that it is so variable, it does take some time and some patience, and we're going to be explaining that when it comes to dosing. One of the things that we really emphasize is look for trusted brands who have transparent practices, and also who invest in testing, because on the cannabis side, in the legal cannabis market, you have to test the products, get them tested. It's the law. on the CBD side, there is no current law that you must test your products. So as more and more people take CBD, you really want to make sure that you can see some test results, that they've paid the money to have their products tested, because a lot of them are making claims and they're not actually true. So plant medicine, lots of variables. Keep that in mind as we go forward. Endocannabinoid system. I'm going to give you my quick Reader's Digest version explanation, and if Jessica, if I leave something out, just let me know that you think is critical to know. But the simple thing to know here is that your endocannabinoid system is like a lock and key system, and you've got these receptors in your body and in your brain, over your organs, skin, everywhere. These receptors of CB1 and CB2 are like locks, and compounds inside of cannabis, the cannabis plant, these chemical compounds, and it's very, very rich in these chemical compounds called cannabinoids and terpenes, and in a moment we'll define those. They're like keys that unlock these receptors. Some of them technically bind to the receptors, and they modulate what's happening in your body or your brain. So we'll talk again, like I say, about the cannabinoids and terpenes. I don't want to get into that too much, but basically we have the system that we didn't even know about until it was identified in the late 80s and early 90s by scientists who were trying to figure out how cannabis reacts with our bodies and our brains, and not just humans, but mammals in general. So our pets are affected and other animals are affected because they have this endocannabinoid system. And as Jessica mentioned, as Dr. Knox mentioned, it's not just cannabis that interacts with this system. There are other properties. Aromatherapy has a lot of properties that can interact with our endocannabinoid system. Different foods can, different spices and herbs can. So that's a little bit more than my Reader's Digest version that I usually give. Did I leave something really important out that we kind of want to set the stage with, Jessica, or does that kind of cover in general the endocannabinoid system?
Yeah, I think that's a great quick primer on the endocannabinoid system. I think the only thing that I would add is the sort of purpose and function of this system is to be a homeostatic regulator. So it sort of works through feedback and communicating between all of our different cells and tissues and organs within our body. There's really not a physiologic system that the endocannabinoid system is not moderating. And so what this means is that when our endocannabinoid system is not in balance, it can be sort of knocked out of balance or tone by a number of different things. That's when we start to see pathology or illness and disease arise, because this fundamental feedback and communication mechanism that is making sure all the different parts of our body are remaining in balance or homeostasis isn't working. So we now know the endocannabinoid system is really critical to health, just overall health.
And when you say other systems, we're talking about everything from digestive system, nervous system, respiratory, endocrine system, even reproductive system. So we're really talking about all of our systems, our entire body. So I did mention cannabinoids and terpenes, and just for everybody's sake, and anyone out there who doesn't know, the cannabinoids are a chemical compound within cannabis. Phytocannabinoids in general are compounds within plants, and phyto meaning plant. Endocannabinoid means inside of the body, and our body actually produces natural cannabinoids. So when our endocannabinoid system is depleted, as Dr. Knox said, that's when we begin to feel sick and illness sets in or disease sets in, and it's often in this day and age caused by stress. So there are plants out there with chemical compounds that interact with our endocannabinoid system. And I listed a few of them at the bottom. THC is the one that you know that binds to receptors in your brain and can alter your perception or produce a sort of a euphoric high. CBD doesn't exactly bind to the receptors in your brain, but it does modulate things within your system and can be a great reducer of inflammation. That's one of the things that it's known for, and an anti-anxiety. There's CBN, CBG, THCV, THCA. There's many cannabinoids, like in fact over 100. The magic number they throw around is 113, but more are being identified all the time. So it's a very rich plant. Terpenes are another chemical compound, not just found in cannabis, but terpenes are in different kinds of aromatherapy we were talking about earlier. Lavender has linalool. Well, cannabis has linalool. Mangoes have myrcene, and cannabis also has myrcene. Citrus fruit has limonene, and so does cannabis. Conifer has, or a pine tree or a fir tree, it has pinene, alpha and beta pinene, and so does cannabis. So cannabis is just like a superfood or a super plant. It has so many chemical compounds, which kind of explains why it can do so many things and have so many effects. The last thing I want to mention, I believe this is the last intro piece, is cannabinoids and terpenes can work with each other, and they can work against each other. So the technical terms are synergistic and antagonistic, and they all contribute to the process of how the cannabis plant or derivatives of it, so CBD, for example, interact with your ECS, your endocannabinoid system. So one of the examples that I use that people are still very surprised to hear is that THC can be modified or modulated by CBD, meaning if you get too high, take some CBD under your tongue and it will help to reduce that high pretty rapidly. It blocks the way that THC is binding to receptors in your brain. So that was just a little overview because we want to dive into the topic for tonight, dosing. How do you start with dosing? So I'm turning it over now to Dr. Knox. If you could give us sort of an intro to that, and we'll just work our way through our slides to give you the basics. How do we start?
Perfect. So, as the age-old mantra, cliche, whatever, however you want to put it goes, when we're starting with cannabis dosing, we are going to start low and go slow. It's a cliche because it's true. and the reason we start this way really goes back to the endocannabinoid system. So there is this thing that we call endocannabinoid tone, which is a reflection of the levels of endocannabinoids in your system, how quickly they're being produced and degraded. It's a reflection of the levels of cannabinoid receptors you have in your system. And the endocannabinoid tone differs from person to person. So my endocannabinoid tone is different from Eliza's, is different from anybody else on this call. And it's affected by all kinds of things: our genes, our epigenetics, how stressed we were today, the quality of our diet, you know, the kinds of chemicals or pollutants we're exposed to in our environment all have an effect on our endocannabinoid tone. And what that means is that the dose that works for your best friend or for your sister or your father may not be the dose of CBD or cannabis that's going to work best for you. And so what starting low and going slow allows us to do is to find our own sort of optimal dose. So when we start low, that means we're usually starting with less than the recommended dose, or less than the therapeutic or optimal dose. And that allows us to do a couple of things. One, it actually primes our ECS, our endocannabinoid system. So, you know, some research will show that within the first couple of days of using CBD or cannabis, people are not as responsive to it as they are on day 3 or 4. That's because our endocannabinoid system needs to be primed. So starting with a low dose allows your system to sort of wake up to the fact that that exogenous or external cannabinoids are being administered. And then we're going to get into a little more detail about what we mean by going slow. But going slow means once you've started with that subtherapeutic or lower than the recommended dose, you're going to very slowly, gradually increase the dose that you're getting into your system. That allows you to, over time, find your optimal dose without overshooting it. So instead of using more medicine than you need, you're actually getting exactly what you need, which to me is another benefit of starting low and going slow. That's more efficient use of your money, right? If you only need 5 milligrams of CBD to get the job done, you're wasting money if you're using 10 milligrams every day just because that's where you happened to start. And I really like this point of less can be more. And we will talk a little bit more about that as we go on as well. But with CBD and cannabis, higher dosing does not always equal more benefit. And very often we're actually seeing moderately low doses become effective. And for some people, even micro doses. You guys have probably heard of micro dosing, but for some people, micro doses is all you need. So that's why we start low and go slow. So Lisa's moved us on to this cannabis dosing is different slide, which is a perfect follow-up to what I was just talking about. So
I was trying to get the timing right. I heard you talking about higher doses doesn't necessarily. I was like, ooh,
no,
that slide too. Let's go
like,
through that one.
I know where she's going here. Yeah, no, this is perfect. So at the top here, we see in bold monophasic dose-response relationship. And what this means is probably what most people might expect. And is, often what we see with pharmaceutical drugs in particular is that as you increase the dose of a medicine, the effect becomes stronger the higher the dose goes, right? So it's sort of like a straight line up and to the right. The higher the dose, the more the effect you get. Unfortunately, that often also means you're getting more side effects too, because the dose is getting higher. That's actually not what we see with cannabis and CBD. With cannabis, we see what's called a biphasic dosing curve. So if you guys can imagine, I'm drawing with my hands, but if you can imagine a bell curve where if you start at the left of the chart, the line is sort of low and at the bottom, and then as you move to the right, the line goes up and to the right. Towards the middle, it turns into a curve, and then as you keep going to the right, it drops down again. That's a biphasic curve. And what it means is that as you start with a low dose of cannabis or CBD and you start to increase the dose, you might start to see more benefit. But there's going to be a point at which, and this is the top of the curve, there's a point at which you will have achieved the maximum benefit you're going to get from that cannabis or CBD medication. And if you go beyond that optimal point, you're either going to start losing therapeutic effect and or you might start getting some unwanted side effects. And so that's sort of a reiteration of why starting low and going slow is so important, is because you want to hit that high point of the curve before it starts dropping back into less effect and side effects, where you're getting just that perfect dose that's giving you maximum benefit without any unwanted side effect. So that was a sort of introduction to the therapeutic window. So
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the therapeutic window, if you're picturing this bell curve that I just described to you, the therapeutic window is this window in the middle of the curve. As it's said here very well, it's the range between the lowest effective dose and the dose that produces unwanted or intolerable side effects. So it's that window in which you have like glorious wiggle room where you're getting lots of benefits without the negative side effects. Your optimal dose is right there in that therapeutic window. If you are new to cannabis, you're probably going to have a narrower therapeutic window compared to people who have used cannabis before. Their window will be wider. That's because as our body sort of gets adjusted or introduced to the cannabinoids, we can broaden our therapeutic window over time. So one really cool thing we know about THC, for instance, is that our bodies will develop tolerance to THC's unwanted side effects, but not to its benefits. So again, by starting low and going slow, you're giving your body an opportunity to adjust and develop a tolerance to some of the possibly unwanted side effects, while still getting the benefits out of that. And so, you know, with that starting low and going slow, our new users who do have a narrow therapeutic window to start with can broaden their window safely and comfortably with those low doses gradually working up. And the biphasic window, or the biphasic curve, the therapeutic window, it applies to THC and CBD. The thing is that with THC, sort of the therapeutic window is going to happen at lower doses of THC compared to it will happen at higher doses of CBD, just because of the different ways that those interact with our cannabinoid receptors.
Oh, interesting. And so there's another point about the way cannabis affects different people. Talk a little bit about this bidirectional effect, the opposites.
Yeah, bidirectional effects are really interesting. What this means is that, and you know, in a way this goes back again to our endocannabinoid tone, but what this is referring to is that two people could take the same exact formulation type of CBD or cannabis, and they might experience completely opposite effects. That can even happen within an individual. You know, one day you take this thing and it gives you this kind of effect, and the next day it might give you something different. There's some suggestion, maybe, I haven't seen any strong evidence of this, but there may be some bidirectional effects based on biologic sex. So males and females may respond slightly differently. But again, this all comes back to endocannabinoid tone, as to why some people might respond one way to a particular medication and somebody might respond a completely different way to that same medication. I do also want to point out here that set and setting are really important. So that's like your mindset when you're medicating, but also your external environment, right? So you can imagine that if you are feeling frazzled and you're in like a crazy work environment and you're like, oh, I'm going to medicate, that might not be a super comfortable place to medicate. And, you know, if you took a walk outside and found a quiet place to medicate with the same exact product, you might have a slightly different effect. And again, this all goes back to your endocannabinoid tone and sort of your mindset and your setting when you are medicating.
So I think another thing then that I find is affecting the effects is the form. And I think the next couple of slides we're going to talk about are the form of cannabis that you're consuming really have an impact on what you feel, how you feel, and how long it takes to feel it, and then how long it lasts.
Yep.
So I'm going to move on to our first slide about specifics about dosing, and take it away, the edibles.
Yeah, the edibles. So the edibles are they're so funny because I think on the one hand, for a lot of people, they're sort of the most comfortable place to start experimenting with cannabis. And on the other hand, they can be some of the trickiest to use.
Right.
And I think with edibles, it's even more important to start low and go slow. So starting with the foods at the top, yes, these days in legal cannabis markets, products are usually very clearly packaged and labeled so that you can somewhat easily get a sense of how much cannabinoids are in that piece. So yes, usually they're broken into 5 milligram or even 10 milligram pieces. So if you have a chocolate bar, it might be that one square is 5 milligrams. If you have a chocolate covered coffee bean, that one bean might be 5 milligrams. But they're come in discrete dosing, which is supposed to be, you know, easy to manage. I think what's tricky about it, especially, you know, if you're talking about baked goods or really, you know, any of these sort of edible forms, you're sort of relying on the cannabinoids having been mixed homogeneously through the product, which may or may not be true, which is why dosing with edibles may not necessarily be very precise. But starting with that low dose of edibles is super critical, because I would say we see the most sort of unwanted cannabis experiences happening with edibles.
Yeah, everybody's had sort of the pot brownie experience. Oh, I didn't even
Yes.
know it was medicated. Oh, I thought I was supposed to eat the whole thing.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And there are a couple reasons why this happens. Edibles take a while to kick in. And I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself. I can't remember what's on the next slides, but edibles take a while to kick in. So depending on what you've eaten, what else you are eating, the integrity of your gut, you know, whether you have a healthy gut or a leaky gut, all of these different factors, how fast you metabolize things. You know, we're now finding out that there are, you've maybe seen some of those genetic tests out there that can look at how quickly you metabolize THC or CBD. So there's all these different variables that go in, but it can take anywhere from, you know, for most people between 60 and 90 minutes, but for some people even longer, 120 minutes, some people shorter, for an edible to kick in. And that's a long time for people to wait. You know, I think a lot of us are used to taking a medicine and we feel it kick in pretty quickly. With an edible, you have to be very patient. And what happens a lot of times is people will use an edible, you know, 15 or 30 minutes later, they don't feel anything, so they redose. And that edible is going to stick with you. You know, if you're a quick metabolizer, maybe only 4 hours. If you're a slow metabolizer, maybe 8 hours or longer. And if you've overdone your dosing because you didn't feel it quickly enough that you redosed, that feeling's going to stick with you for a while, and it can be uncomfortable. The other
but grab CBD, grab some CBD, because that can help relieve that.
Totally. CBD is the antidote. CBD, limonene is supposed to be very helpful with, and to be specific, we're talking about, this is a THC effect, but so CBD, limonene, beta caryophyllene, which is another terpene, it's found in black pepper, hops, and cloves, can also be very useful. So I think it was Dr. Ethan Russo, who is a very like preeminent scholar and researcher and physician in the cannabis space, once said that the ideal sort of antidote for an unwanted high is a plate of pesto pasta, because you're going to have limonene and pinene and beta caryophyllene all up in this plate of pesto that will help you feel better.
Wow. Okay.
But, the other thing that happens with edibles or in beverages, when we take cannabis into our guts, the way it's going to be processed through our body, it's going to go through our liver for metabolism before it hits our general circulation. And this is what we call first pass metabolism, where the liver is going to sort of take its tax before it gets to the rest of our body. Well, when THC is metabolized through the liver, it gets turned into 11-hydroxy-THC, a slightly different form. 11-hydroxy-THC is at least 10 times as potent as THC on CB1 receptors. And so that's another reason, on top of the accidental additional dosing, another reason why people get into trouble with edibles is because that THC is metabolized into a more potent form when it goes through the liver. And that's something that doesn't happen nearly as much when we inhale it, when we inhale cannabis, or we use it as a tincture and it goes directly to our circulation before first pass metabolism, et cetera.
So when you're saying the tincture, it's taken sublingually and it is going to the sublingual gland, so it's bypassing liver.
That's
going
right.
Straight to blood. Okay.
Yeah, and that assumes we're taking a tincture correctly, right? Because I think one of the most common errors in taking a tincture is just dropping it in your mouth and swallowing it, which essentially turns it into an edible. So yes, the appropriate way to use a tincture, if you're using it orally, is to drop it, under the tongue, and let it sit there, or sort of swish it around your mouth for 30 seconds to a minute. Or you can rub it into your gums, or some people will rub it into their nasal septum, another sort of mucosal membrane. And that allows the medicine to be absorbed directly into those capillaries and go right into circulation, as opposed to going through that first pass metabolism in the liver.
And speaking of tincture, the more traditional tincture is alcohol-based. It is painful to put alcohol-based tinctures under your tongue. Now, because cannabis, THC, fat soluble, it's a lot of it's based on oils. The
Mhm.
oils do not have that same effect, but I can't even imagine putting an alcohol tincture, just
Oof.
resting that under your tongue. That would
No.
burn. So speaking of dosing tinctures, can you talk a little bit about the measurements? Because I get all mixed up, milligram versus milliliter,
Yeah.
and how you figure that out.
Yeah, yeah, it can be tricky. Ugh, anytime we have math, I'm so glad you skipped the infused beverages with all that complicated math.
Oh, I left it there on the screen so everyone can just sort of take notes, and they're going to see it over and over again when they get the video, because
Yes.
yes, too many numbers. And it is a lot of math sometimes when you're trying to get to very precise dosing. So,
It is. Yeah, it
but
can
on the
be.
tincture side, how would you explain it? How would
Yeah,
you?
so I actually like tinctures because I think the dosing is very simple, really. And so usually what you'll see on a tincture bottle are milligrams of cannabinoids, and it should tell you, there are X milligrams of THC, X milligrams of CBD, etc. And then the milliliters refers to the liquid volume. So usually, as in like this example, you tincture droppers come in like 1 milliliter um, uh, capacity, right? So if the bottle says there are 10 milligrams of THC per milliliter, you know that in one full dropper, there are 10 milligrams of THC. So if you wanted to do a fraction of that, if you want to do 5 milligrams of THC, you would know, okay, I need a half dropper. And for me, that's pretty simple. I know fractions are not everybody's cup of tea, but I do think compared to edibles, when you're trying to get an eighth of a cookie,
Right.
or with inhalational methods where it's like, well, how deep did you inhale and how long did you hold it? With a tincture, you know that you can look at sort of the graduated measurements on the dropper and compare that to what the label on the bottle says and figure out exactly what sort of milligram dosing you're getting. And I just want to reiterate that it is, oil-based tinctures to me are superior. And that's usually what you're seeing. I actually don't see that many alcohol-based tinctures on the shelves these days. But because the cannabinoids are lipophilic, meaning they like fat, they dissolve in fat, you'll have a better distributed cannabinoid profile throughout a bottle of oil tincture.
Oh, interesting. And one of the little tips that as I was doing research for this, using an oral syringe, which anyone who has little kids knows these oral syringes, because sometimes the droppers don't have those measurements on them.
Right.
Oftentimes they don't. And so especially if it's a non-medical market, they don't really put those on there because you're not supposed to be taking it as medicine. So not supposed to. So an oral syringe can be extremely handy and especially those more narrow, thin ones, they have very small increments. And so you could really, really be a lot more careful with your dosing through that.
That's a great tip.
All right, so low dose of THC. Let's get down to some brass tacks, some numbers. What is a low dose?
Yeah, so a low dose of THC, and again, this will depend on, is this a naive user, an experienced user? But for us, I know the slide here says 5 to 10 milligrams of THC. I'm typically even more conservative than that with a new patient or a new user. I would say 2.5 to 5 milligrams of THC. It's very unlikely that somebody will get the unwanted side effects of THC from that low of a dose. And I think we talk about the side effects a little bit more later. But the feeling of being high or anxious or paranoid or those kinds of things are less likely to happen with a low dose of THC. And again, in addition to sort of avoiding THC intoxication by starting at those low doses, it also gives your body an opportunity to get adjusted to THC and develop a tolerance to those unwanted side effects and broaden that therapeutic window that we talked about. So again, starting at a low dose, anywhere between 2.5 to 5 milligrams of THC is generally a safe place to start. And as it says here, this 10-to-1 ratio or higher, if you have a product that has a CBD to THC ratio of 10-to-1 or higher, that means 10 parts CBD to every 1 part of THC, it is very unlikely that you will get any of the unwanted side effects from THC, because the CBD will sort of work at that CB1 receptor to change the way that THC is acting upon it. And you can minimize or completely eliminate the unwanted side effects that THC can give for some people.
I'm going to jump into this really quick and run through it. This is just a little primer for anyone here who is a total beginner. Different forms of consumption, you can feel them at different amounts of time, and then they last for different amounts of time. We've already talked about the fact that there's so many variables, but inhaling will be one of the faster ways of feeling the effects of cannabis. And we're really talking, again, THC, much more than CBD in terms of immediate effects. Peaks around 30 minutes, lasts for a couple of hours. For some people, it could last longer. Smoking, inhaling vapor, which is vaping, dabbing, which is a real high temperature way of vaporizing cannabis, and then inhaling vapor. Ingesting it, there's the way we just talked about it in terms of edibles. There's also the tinctures. So there is a difference there. The tinctures are going to be more rapid, but if you're taking it into your stomach and then going through your liver, it'll take a lot longer, and then it lasts 4 to 6 hours, 8 hours, even longer. And then applying it topically, you could feel a topical application of THC cream, for example, a pain cream, in just minutes. Or it might take a little bit longer to feel the effects, and then it could last for a couple of hours. So I don't want to go into too much detail because we are really running out of time. We're having such a good time here.
I'm sorry, I'm so
much good information
today. Oh my God.
You know what? It's such great information, and obviously we can go over a little bit if anybody has to depart before we finish. Then you'll get the recording, so don't worry about that. But I just don't want to even stop you because I'm going, oh my gosh, I'm taking notes myself. But let's move on to a couple of more things. We're going to talk about, can you overdose on THC? We're going to talk about when cannabis is not recommended. And then how do you increase or titrate up your doses? And then we're going to move into CBD wellness and CBD dosing, which is different from THC. So just letting you know what's coming down in a few moments. But can you overdose on THC?
This is such an important question. And the answer is no. That's the beautiful thing. That's the beautiful thing about THC and cannabis. You cannot overdose. And what we mean by overdose is, when you think about opioids or narcotics, we think about overdose meaning people stop breathing and they die, right? That doesn't happen with cannabis. And the reason it doesn't happen is because our brain stem, which is the part of our brain that controls our respiratory drive and our cardiovascular drive, is nearly devoid of cannabinoid receptors. So there's nothing in that part of the brain for THC to bind to cause respiratory depression that could lead to overdose death. And so when we do talk about THC overdose or cannabis overdose, what we're actually talking about are unwanted side effects associated with dosing too much. So as it shows on the slide here, if people have too much cannabis, they can feel disoriented, anxious, paranoid, sleepy. They can have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, very uncomfortable, certainly. But these effects will typically last only as long as whatever method you used. So, Aliza just showed us sort of the duration of effect based on how you used cannabis. And for most people, just, being in a calm, quiet environment can help them feel better. You can sleep it off. You can, take CBD to sort of mitigate the unwanted side effects of THC. So not dangerous, but certainly uncomfortable. But most importantly, you're not going to overdose yourself to death with cannabis or THC.
There are situations though where cannabis is not advisable. So
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about some conditions that people might have or some situations where cannabis probably should not be taken?
Absolutely. So there are two big categories that I think of where we wouldn't want to use cannabis, or specifically we want to be cautious with how we use cannabis, and especially THC. So one is for patients who have heart conditions. We know that THC can increase heart rate. I think it's that immediately after use, it can sort of spike blood pressure, but then drop it. And we see this more so with inhaling. If you inhale THC, right, because it has that quick onset, it sort of shocks the heart into an increased heart rate. And for people who have a history of heart disease, we're worried of causing a heart attack or a dangerously high blood pressure, something like that. So certainly patients who have a cardiovascular disease history, we caution them about using THC. They can probably be safe with low doses, but we would probably caution them away from using an inhaled method. The other category that we like to take caution with is people who have a personal or a family history of psychosis. So, people have maybe heard that cannabis or THC are associated with schizophrenia. There's no causative association that's been found there. So there's no evidence that THC causes schizophrenia or psychosis. However, we do know that usually at very high doses, there have been instances where people have acute psychosis in response to using very high doses of THC. They will recover after that THC is out of their system. But you can imagine for patients who have their own personal history of psychosis or that kind of mental health issue, or they have a family history of that, which might make their own personal risk higher, we do want to be cautious with THC in particular, because we wouldn't want to, to push them into an uncomfortable level of anxiety or, sort of detachment from reality. So there are instances where we do want to be cautious with THC. And again, just more reason to start low and go slow.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So how do you increase your dose of THC? And you mentioned a little bit about this in terms of starting low, going slow, and then incrementally. What does that mean exactly? What does that look like?
Yeah, so let's say we're starting with 2.5 milligrams, because we said that's sort of a safe place to start. And this is really sort of specific to if you're treating an issue, right? Like if you want to work on pain or sleep or whatever, you're going to start with something like 2.5 milligrams. Based on the method you're using, you'll know how quickly it's going to kick in. If you're getting the relief you need after, if you inhaled after 30 minutes, you've got the effect you need. If you used a tincture, you're getting the effect after 30 minutes, then you're good, right? You don't need to do anything. But if you are still feeling pain, it's okay to redose, right? So if you started with 2.5 milligrams, you can add another 2.5 milligrams. And what you want to do is sort of redose as needed, but you have to be very mindful, right? You need to be paying attention to the feedback your body is giving you. And as soon as you reach that sort of minimal effective dose where you're like, oh, okay, I'm noticing that I'm starting to have an effect, stay there and sort of stay at that dose for 3 days. And again, that's giving your body a chance to get primed and to broaden your therapeutic window. And then if on day 4, for instance, this is sort of, it doesn't have to be exactly 3 days, but just for this example, on day 4, if you're feeling like, okay, I started to notice a decrease in my pain, but I still have it and I want to see if I can do a little bit more, you can add on to that dose. So if on days 1 through 3, you gradually got yourself up to 5 milligrams of THC, and that's where you started to notice an effect on your pain, well, on day 4, you can start at 5 milligrams. And then if you need to redose, you can add another 2.5 to see if you're getting effect there. And you just sort of go through that back and forth trial and error feedback sort of process over the course of, ultimately a week or 2 weeks or however long it takes for you to find that dose you're looking for. And if you start to find that, oh, all of a sudden I'm getting some of the unwanted side effects of THC, like I'm feeling a little bit of a head high or I'm feeling anxious, that's a signal to back down on that THC dosing.
Interesting. And so finding your dose, and it has to also do with the type of cannabis or type of product that you're taking. You had talked about the CBD dominant cannabis. So, and you mentioned ratios as well. So then you can also modulate your ratios as opposed to just
right.
the amount. So can you talk just a little bit about that? And then we'll move on to CBD dosing, which is very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we mentioned before, there are ratios of CBD to THC. Most people, most naive users will start with a CBD dominant medication because that allows them to get the benefit of the cannabinoids without the risk of the unwanted side effects of THC. However, there are some things that we do want THC for. THC is really good for addressing pain. It's really good for aiding sleep. It has its benefits. And for some people, sticking with a CBD dominant medication might not give them the relief they need. So if you're using, you know, a CBD dominant medication, you've sort of gone through this titrating or gradually increasing dose process that we talked about, and you're still not getting relief, it might be time to look for a maybe less dominant CBD product. So move to a 2-to-1 ratio or a 1-to-1 ratio, where the CBD will still balance the THC, but you're going to get a little bit more effect from the THC. And by this time, you know, if you've been slowly working into these, you're going to have widened that therapeutic window, and you'll have an easier time adding in THC to your process.
I'd put a little note at the bottom, and then you let me know that normally I always say, or I had thought, that THC is the analgesic. So you get that pain killing effect from your THC, where CBD takes care of the inflammation. But you were saying that they both have both qualities.
Yeah, they actually both do. They both do both.
Okay.
They do it through slightly different mechanisms. So, you know, THC and CBD work on different receptors. We've mentioned that CBD does not work directly on the cannabinoid receptors, but it has 65 other receptor targets in our body, at least 65 that we know about. And so it does work to reduce pain. It works as an analgesic, and it's an anti-inflammatory because it works on all these various different receptors to do so. And THC will similarly work on both CB1 and CB2 to provide analgesia and anti-inflammatory effect.
Oh, excellent. Good to know. Now, CBD. Dosing CBD from a wellness standpoint, because I see all these products and the doses are usually 5 or 10 or 15 milligrams of CBD, and I'm like, is that really going to do anything?
Yeah, it's such a good and interesting question. And I want to start by just, because I didn't say this really directly earlier, but for cannabis that includes, like, you know, THC is the limiting factor on dosing, right? Like, we're trying to avoid people getting any unwanted adverse effects with THC, which is why we're so cautious with dosing THC. When it comes to CBD and dosing for wellness, it's a little bit different. And I want to be clear that when I say dosing for wellness, that means you're not trying to address any particular concern. So you're not addressing pain, you're not addressing anxiety or sleep necessarily. If you are just like a generally well, healthy person and you want to use CBD because you know it's a great anti-inflammatory and it's a great sort of health thing, which it is, then we're generally seeing that 20 to 50 milligrams of CBD daily, so that's a total daily dose, is a great sort of supplemental wellness dose. And, you know, some people might not feel anything, again, because you're not addressing a specific concern. That said, some people might, you know, over a couple weeks notice, hey, I feel less stressed in general, or like, I'm a little bit nicer with my husband, or like whatever, right? Some people will notice that their temperament might be a little bit different, or that they're sleeping a little bit better, but it might not be a, like, you know, super salient signal that you're getting. Now, for people who are trying to use CBD to address a specific ailment, I would again suggest, you know, generally starting low and going slow so that you can find exactly what dose is going to alleviate what you're trying to treat. And again, with CBD, we can be a little more liberal. So you might start somewhere around 5 or 10 milligrams and see how that works for you. But you can feel a little more comfortable titrating up as needed because you're not worried about those sort of pesky side effects.
Got it. Although I had read, and I put that in one of the earlier slides, that too much CBD, and that has to be a much higher dose, can give you some gut discomfort and maybe even diarrhea. So when you get to that point, that's not what you want.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And a lot of that is, again, attributable to what you're using. So in particular, if you're using a tincture that has, you know, 5 milligrams of CBD per milliliter, and you are trying to take 50 milligrams and you're taking 10 milliliters of oil, that's actually a lot of oil, and that very well may cause diarrhea. So maybe you need
Got
to
it.
look for a product that's a little more concentrated. But again, as I mentioned earlier, that biphasic curve applies to CBD just as well as it applies to THC. It's just that CBD, the curve is sort of set at a higher dosing. And so it is possible for people to get biphasic or bidirectional effects with CBD. At low doses, CBD is actually alerting. You know, people, I think about using CBD for sleep, and I think that's more attributable to CBD helping to relieve anxiety or stress. So it allows the brain to quiet down and fall asleep. But it's actually alerting at low doses. Whereas if you have very high doses of CBD, that can be sedating. So that biphasic curve does apply to CBD as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's what I had heard as well, that CBD people are like, I take it for sleep, but it's more likely that it's just relaxing that brain that's going so racy and keeping you away from sleep because you're just so like thinking so much. Dosing goals, we've already talked about how it can look really different from person to person, but it can also look different from somebody who has a very acute condition to someone who has chronic conditions. So I know that I have been using CBD to treat arthritis, and that is a much different dose and a much different way of taking it. One of the things that was on a different slide that I wanted to just mention is the idea of, I call it layering. I don't know what the technical or medical term is, but I will use a tincture for internal inflammation and also for de-stressing. And then I use a topical to address some very specific pain. And so there are ways of, you know, I sometimes I think to myself, am I getting too much CBD by doing all these different ways? But that could help you address certain issues, couldn't it?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. We recommend that all the time, and we call it method layering. So you are spot on.
Method layering. Oh, cool.
And,
Okay.
and yeah, it's combining methods that have different sort of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics to get more effect. And so what you were talking about in particular, for addressing pain, we'll say you need to get cannabis in your body and on your body. So
yes,
taking it in and also applying it on, so you can come at the problem from multiple angles. Absolutely.
excellent. Well, here is another thing that is recommended, more on the THC side, I guess. Talk a little bit about taking a break.
Yeah, so occasionally we'll see that an individual has been doing really well with their cannabis, sometimes even their CBD for a while, and then all of a sudden it seems like it's no longer working for them. Or they're feeling like, okay, I've been at this dose for a while, but all of a sudden it feels like I need to increase my dose in order to get the same effect. That can happen because our endocannabinoid system, again, it's very dynamic and fungible. So it's possible to sort of burn out your cannabinoid receptors. They can get overstimulated. And when they do that, they'll just go away. Like they'll just, take themselves out of commission sort of. And so you're not getting the same effect with the same dose or type of medication you're getting. Fortunately, we can reset the endocannabinoid system pretty quickly with what we call a medication holiday. And that's a break of anywhere between, for most people, 3 to 7 days. I would say on average, it's about 5 days. Some people might need a couple of weeks. Just taking a break from your cannabis altogether. And then after that holiday, most people can come back and go right back to the dose that they had been doing really well with and get that same effect again. And some people, I would probably even encourage, try actually restarting at a slightly lower dose, because you might find that you don't even need as much as you were taking at your quote unquote optimal dose, but you're giving your system a chance to reset and sort of reprime itself to be responsive.
Interesting. I'm going to go through the next 2 slides rather quickly. They're just sort of summary slides. Then we can get to some questions, and then we'll get to our giveaway. So keeping track, that is something I hear over and over again, particularly when we talk about microdosing, but also when you're just dosing in general to get specific effects, you want to keep track. There are all kinds of journals out there. You can even just use a notebook, but there are apps. There's an app called Strain Print at strainprint.ca, or I think it's also strainprint.com, a Canadian company founded by a woman, helps you keep track of your doses. But a journal, and any kind of journal, is helpful. to record when you took it, what your day had been like, what foods and drink you've had, what exactly you're taking, and how much you're taking. How are you feeling before you took it? How do you feel after you take it? And overall outcomes. Has it improved anything at all for you? So the tracking of it is all part of the process. This is going all the way back to what I said at the beginning, plant medicine. It can be variable. It can take some time. You really are trying to calibrate and find your right dose. The dosing is different for cannabis and CBD, different for each individual, different effects that you can get depending on your ratios, the doses you're taking, how often, how much. So it varies on so many factors, and that's also why keeping track is really good. Back to start low, go slow, and increase incrementally. I think a mistake some people do is, like you said with the edibles, increasing during that day, that same day. Wait to that next day, or wait a couple of days. Right. Yeah, you don't want to keep layering and let me just try some more right now. And then if it's not working after a while of taking THC, giving your body a break. And so plant medicine can be incredibly powerful and incredibly effective. It is medicine. And I think it's just a little bit different than going into the drugstore, pulling something off the shelf and just taking it based on the instructions. It could be very, very different from that experience. And I think a lot of us are just accustomed to not having to do math. So it does take a little bit of thinking and process, but you can get to your optimal dose. Questions. I definitely want to get to a couple of questions. I know a lot of you are probably getting close to bedtime. Some of us are getting close to dinner time. So anything that we don't answer today, I'm going to put into a Q&A, and maybe Jessica, Dr. Knox will work with us to get a couple of more answers out there for you, and then we'll just send it to you by email. But Erica, what questions do we have at the moment?
Do THC and CBD cause dependency?
Oh, good question. Such a good question, and kind of tricky to answer. So it's hard to answer because, some people will use CBD and or THC indefinitely to manage whatever concern they're managing, right? But in a way that we wouldn't say, well, you are chronically using your blood pressure medication to manage your blood pressure, so you must be dependent on your blood pressure medication. We wouldn't say that if you are using CBD or THC for a long amount of time to manage pain, you're necessarily dependent on it, right? So when we're talking about dependency, really what we're talking about is sort of like a physiologic need to have that substance, right? So if you take that substance away, you have physiologic withdrawal symptoms. And we know that can happen for some people, typically with people who are very long time, very heavy, frequent users. It's more common. Most people don't have this issue, especially if they're using cannabis or CBD or THC at lower doses. But generally what a THC or CBD withdrawal looks like is irritability for the most part. So again, not like a dangerous withdrawal, nothing super problematic, just a little bit of discomfort until your body sort of readjusts to the lack of the cannabinoids or the lack of the phytocannabinoids.
Just get a little cranky.
Yeah, and I think the official statistic is something like 9% of cannabis users become addicted. We think that statistic is likely inflated just because our system tends to label people as addicted to cannabis if they if they go to their doctor and report it, or if they get caught up in the criminal justice system, they might get slapped with a cannabis addiction label, but 9% is the sort of going statistic.
So Marilyn has a question, and I feel like we hit upon this in just about every webinar, so I'm glad she's asking the question so we continue to reiterate it. Is CBD effective by itself, or is it better to combine some THC in your dose?
Good question.
I love that question. So yeah, CBD can absolutely be effective by itself. However, I would always recommend taking CBD in as close to its whole plant or full spectrum form as possible, And that usually means there will be some THC present. So you might remember early in the slideshow, Eliza mentioned the entourage or ensemble effect. What that effect means is that our cannabinoids and our terpenes and our flavonoids, their sum, their sum is greater than their parts, right? So when they work together, they work more effectively than they do on their own. So if you were to take CBD in isolation, you might actually need a higher dose of CBD than you would if you took it in combination with THC and terpenes and flavonoids, because all of those are going to work together synergistically to provide more effect and also less side effect. So you can take CBD by itself. I would always recommend taking it in as close to its full plant form as possible, which is going to include some THC as well as terpenes and flavonoids and a bunch of other good stuff.
Absolutely. So Casey is talking about how she took 6 weeks to dial in her dosage for CBD for chronic pain. She's asking if she took enough time on average, or should she have taken any longer?
No, I mean, it's so independent. And I think if you feel that you have found your optimal dose, and it only took 6 weeks, that's awesome. You know, for some people, it will be a much longer process, but it doesn't have to be, right? You might have just happened to zone in on the exact product and the exact dose that worked for you. And if it's working well for you, you're getting the effect you want and you're not getting side effects, then you should feel amazing about that.
Stacy wanted you to just come back to the part where you were talking about tinctures, and she said, "Did you say that tinctures bypass the liver?" Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. So if you take a tincture correctly, meaning that most of it is absorbed into your oral mucosa, or again, some people might even put it in their nasal mucosa. But if you use it in a way that allows it to be absorbed into those capillaries, it will go directly into your systemic circulation, as opposed to being ingested into the stomach, where it will then go through the liver and first pass metabolism, right? So if you just swallow a tincture without holding it in your mouth, it's going to act like an edible. But if you hold it in your mouth and give those small capillaries a chance to absorb the cannabinoids, it will bypass that liver metabolism.
Do you need to have, like, nothing to eat or drink 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after? Does it matter? Teeth brushing? Do you need to eat? What are the SOPs there?
Yeah, for the tinctures, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I've seen and heard, like, don't brush your teeth immediately afterward, or like don't drink a bunch of water immediately afterward, but that's primarily not to like wash out what's already in there. But it's not like you have to avoid doing or specifically do anything around or before or anything around administering a tincture. You can just put it directly in your mouth and hold it there.
Sarah was asking about applying the CBD tincture to her nasal membranes. Is that appropriate as well?
Yep, you can absolutely do that.
Fantastic.
I had never heard that at all. However, there are some products out there now that are nasal sprays.
That's right.
So Vera Wellness, I believe, has a nasal spray. There's also inhalers like an asthma inhaler.
Yeah.
That is a very rapid acting and a lot more precise on the dosing side, is what I had heard about inhalers. There's also suppositories, so vaginal and rectal suppositories, where the mucous membranes can absorb, maybe not all the way into the bloodstream, because I heard, because the big thing is, wow, if I do that, will I get high? It doesn't seem to reach the brain in the same way, but it does seem to address pain and discomfort and inflammation. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And we really like, I mean, suppositories are not the favorite way for people to administer, but we actually really, as clinicians, we really like suppositories because when you do place them correctly, they will avoid that first pass metabolism that you would get from an ingested version. And they don't, even with THC, we really don't see them causing that high effect that you would get if you administer the THC in a different way. And it's just because of the way our circulation works at the sort of base of our colon. You just don't get those same effects, but that can be a really great way to administer cannabis for low back pain, for uterine concerns or issues, for our patients with prostate cancer. Like, we want to get the medicine directly there, and so the suppository route is really great for a lot of reasons.
We have
interesting.
two more great questions. Are you up for it?
Yeah.
I'm in my pajamas already.
Well, I have to say that at any moment my family is going to walk through the door.
Yes, they are. They're going to bust in the door.
Toddler calling for me. So let's get those last two questions and let's get over to picking a winner and the last couple of slides to say good night. But we will try to get some more questions answered later. Go for it.
So Bernie is asking the question, is there a lab test to check the endocannabinoid system?
Love that question.
Mm-hmm.
So there are tests in development. So I think it's Stanford or UCSF actually does have a blood test for anandamide levels, but it is not available to the public yet. It's not commercially available. You couldn't go to your doctor at UCSF or Stanford and ask for them to order it, but they've developed it and perhaps they're using it in sort of research capacity right now. So those tests are in development, but they are not yet available to us as the public.
Good to know. Okay, Sylvia wants to know, what is nano, and does that matter as far as absorption? Does nano make a better product?
Yeah, that's such a good question.
Yeah.
So nano is this, there's like this nanotechnology where these sort of manufacturers are claiming that they've made like the molecules into nano, right? Like nano is a size.
Very, 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 very small.
Yeah, like a very, very tiny sort of size increment that, I think they're purporting is supposed to be more absorbable, more bioavailable. Frankly, we haven't seen the research or the evidence to prove that these are any more bioavailable or absorbable than the regular product. Right now, all that I can tell is it's like a nice marketing sort of, buzzy thing, nanoparticles of CBD or THC, but we haven't seen any evidence yet that they are any better than your regularly sized
molecules. I have to just say my own personal experience, because I do a lot of the CBD testing for our company. When we say testing, I don't mean lab testing, I mean trying the products. Yeah. And it takes a long time to really, I can only test a certain product, one product, for a length of time to see if there's any effects, because it does take longer to really, it's not that immediate. Ooh.
Right.
But when I have taken the nanotechnology products, I felt very speedy. It right away just made me feel like that super stimulated feeling, which I personally don't like. I'm a 3/4 of a cup of coffee a day kind of gal, and anything more than that, and I feel super speedy, and it was very uncomfortable. And so that led me to believe that possibly it's hitting you faster, but that's not necessarily better.
Right.
But it really did make me feel very, very uncomfortable. And I remember being also very irritable after taking it, which seemed like the opposite effect that you would have wanted. And somebody just said to me, the closer you take it to the natural plant itself, which is a little bit of what you're saying, is the way Mother Nature intended it. And as we continue to manufacture and change it, particularly synthesize it, making synthetics to mimic it, it doesn't do the same thing.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
I want to get back really quickly. Let's all shut off our video for a moment and head back for just a couple of last slides as we close out the evening. Let's see. It's a couple of different buttons I have to press to get there. One moment. Here we go. Picking the winner, Erica. We don't say the full name, by the way. We just say the first name, maybe the last initial, and maybe where they're located. But we will contact you to let you know that you won. If you won the GEOVANA CBD tea with the Clean Coconut Deep Relief Lavender Lotion and a copy of our book, Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness. So who's the lucky winner?
The lucky winner this evening is Kat D. Kat D, I will be sending you an email tomorrow morning. Talk to you soon.
Right. Now, Kat, if you are in Canada, which we don't know right now, we cannot ship you those 2 CBD products. We will find something else really awesome for you and send that instead. But thanks again to GEOVANA and to Clean Coconut for being here and supporting what we do. If you want to stay in touch with Ellementa, we have some groups. Go to ellementa.com/groups. They're Facebook groups right now, but a lot of people are on there, and it's a great way. They're closed, so you do have to ask permission to join. We have gatherings, in-person gatherings. So go to ellementa.com/gatherings to find out where we will be in person. Of course, we're all over social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, even Pinterest, if that's your thing. I just wanted to say before I move on, actually, let me see if I can move back. How do we find you, Dr. Knox?
Oh, so you can find me on Instagram. You can follow my family. We're at the Knox Docs. I personally am, what am I? At Jessica Doc Knox, but gosh, I haven't posted in a while, so don't judge me. But at the Knox Docs, you can also check us out on our website, drsknox.com. As I mentioned before we started, we are doing our own Doctors Knox seminars now. We live stream them, so even if you're not in the city where we're doing them, you can tune in. And so that information will be at drsknox.com.
Fantastic. I wanted to then tell you all, save the date for next month. We'll have Dr. Junella Chin, who is my co-author on Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness. But we're going to be talking about the estrogen and cannabis connection. Dr. Knox alluded to the fact that males and females may be experiencing cannabis differently. Well, Dr. Chin talks a lot about estrogen, how the estrogen we have or even don't have could be affecting how cannabis affects us. So that is October 23rd. Go to ellementa.com/webinars, and we'll have a sign up ready for you soon. Some special offers. You'll also get this by email, so don't worry if you don't take it down. But 20% off from Clean Coconut, 15% off from GEOVANA. Again, you will get this by email. Thanks to both of those companies, both women-owned companies. Thank you all for being here. We did run long. This was a great conversation. Dr. Jessica Knox, awesome to have you back. Can't wait to have you back again. And I will send you some more questions, so get ready.
Perfect. I can't wait.
And Erica, thank you again for being the magic behind our webinars. I cannot wait to see you in action, because I'm going to have you as a guest soon.